So good for you, Steve. One day I hope to be just like you. So here we go. Business ownership options. There's basically three. Create a startup business on your own, buy an existing business, or buy a franchise. Starting your own business. As in anything, there's a risk-reward analysis that you need to do. And no matter what business you're thinking of or what business you may already be in, there are advantages and disadvantages. First, we'll talk about the plus side of the ledger. The advantages are total control. You make all the decisions. You're not beholden to anyone unless you have a loan, in which case you're beholden to the lender. There's room for creativity. You can pretty much do whatever it is you want to do. There's no predetermined rules unless you write them, and if you have employees, they have to follow them. Most of the time, there's a large upside. You can build your business really from your passion. And I know several people who started businesses or morphed their hobby that they loved into a successful business. So on the other side of the ledger, there are some disadvantages. You have to create some sort of systems. There needs to be at least a modicum of structure. You're likely to have limited financial options. New businesses are almost always slow to ramp up, and independent startup businesses, which is what we're talking about here on this slide, has a high failure rate. And later on in the presentation, we will actually give you some statistics on failure rate and success rates for startups and franchises. So, starting with buying or resale businesses. As we just talked in the previous slide, there's two sides of the ledger. On the plus side, there's existing cash flow. You do your due diligence, and you should have a very good picture of what that looks like. And I'm assuming most people that start a business would have an accountant to assist in evaluating the information. Goodwill has already been established, so the community knows about the business. It has there are actual financial results. It's definitely more attractive to lenders. Lenders certainly perceive the risk to be lower for lending to a business person who's buying an existing business because of the financial track record. Not only do you have a better chance of getting a loan, but you have a better chance of getting a preferred interest rate. So the market's been established. There's an existing customer base. There are employees in place. Systems may be in place to one extent or another. And one of the financing options may be owner financing. On the other side of the ledger, there are some disadvantages. Notice cash flow again. If cash flow is weak, of course that affects the price you'll pay, but your challenge is to build it to a point where it's profitable and you're thriving. The opposite of goodwill is badwill. During due diligence, you need to look and talk to people in the community to see how they feel toward that business. The business may be overpriced, so again, I'll emphasize the need for an accountant. Unless you are an accountant doing a business, it's always good to have an accountant. It's money well spent. There could be hidden seller motives, and again, that's due diligence, meeting with the seller. You need to be pretty good at reading body language and making sure there's not two sets of books. Employee defection. I can speak from personal experience. I've been on both sides of the acquisition, being the acquirer, and also working with a company that was acquired. Depending upon the attitude of the new owner, employees may decide that there's too much of a change in management style or business philosophy and defect. An employee turnover, in my estimation, is the equivalent of business cancer. Sometimes turnover may be what I call addition by subtraction, people that really aren't doing their job or shouldn't be there, but you really don't want to lose good employees. They really are gold. Back to the other slide, please. Thank you. Higher debt service, and usually independent people in business or entrepreneurs haven't done the greatest job in training and providing support. So in buying a resale business, that may be one of your challenges. Okay, buying a franchise. Advantages: name recognition, licensed trademark, proven business system to start and operate, training and support, initial and ongoing, marketplace expertise, and purchasing power that you take advantage of. If you're part of a fairly large system that may have 300 or 400 operating units or thousands of operating units, you get the benefit of the purchasing power as opposed to having an independent business. A much lower failure rate, lower cost financing options. Lenders like successful franchise brands. Locations. You get to choose your location. Of course, it has to be approved by the franchisor, but if you're buying an existing business, the location is already chosen for you because it is where it is. You have the ability to do what I call customer intercepts and conduct unbiased research and learn how, from your existing customers or as your business ramps up, what you can do to, of course you can do this in an individual business too. Disclosure. The Federal Trade Commission requires every franchisor to, at a certain point in the consideration process, to give the prospective franchisee a disclosure document, usually referred to as DD. And this document is in the same order so that if you're considering more than one franchise, you can literally put the documents side by side and the numbers are the same and the titles and the headings are the same. The information obviously will be different. And this is how the FTC attempts to regulate. There was a time in the 70s where there was a lot of shenanigans going on with franchising, and that really doesn't exist anymore for the most part. Part of a franchise family. This was very important to me when I was a franchisee because I had the franchisor that I could call on and they had great resources and I had support in the field. One of the things that, in my experience, most franchisees don't do enough of is talk to their franchisor about their issues and training needs and other needs. Sometimes almost unconsciously, a we-they, can develop. I always feel that franchising is a partnership. The franchisor is the senior partner. I see the franchisor as the greatest or one of the greatest resources in addition to my fellow franchisees that I can get on the phone with or go visit if they're close enough. Disadvantages. Fewer industry options. Structured operating system in most franchises, and I need to emphasize that the franchisor expects their franchisees to follow the structure of their operating system and not deviate. Territory restrictions. Most franchise agreements, depending on the nature of the business, describe a protected territory. So that's a good thing. Can only sell approved products. Now, I said that's a good thing on territory restrictions. It's a disadvantage, but it's also an advantage. You can only sell approved products. So when I was a KFC franchisee, if I decided one day that, geez, I'd really like to start selling strudel or apple pie, I'd be in trouble. You can't do that. Ongoing royalty payments. Now, we list that as a disadvantage, but like territory restrictions, it goes both ways. The value you get for the royalty payments are some of the things that we've already listed: the structure, the operating systems, the training, and the ongoing support. But some people look at, geez, I have to pay 5% of my revenues or 4% of my revenues to the mothership, but that's the value that they've created by having a successful system. Little initial cash flow from startup. So if you're buying an existing franchise, that's different, like buying an existing business. But buying a franchise and then having to find a location and start from scratch, obviously you're not going to be doing $1 zillion in the first month of business. We can leave that slide up, but I want to let everyone on the call know that there's an organization, and it's called the IFA, the International Franchise Association. IFA.org. You don't have to be a member to go on their website and navigate, and you can see how many different types of franchise businesses there are. And there's a lot of fact gathering, or what I like to call pre-due diligence, that you can do to educate yourself as to the world of franchising. And the IFA, and I was involved with them for many, many years, is just an ultra first-class organization, and they live to support the franchise industry. So, getting to the I think we can go to the next slide. Thank you. I'm sorry. What is franchising? If you ask 10 people, you might get 10 different definitions. So this is not necessarily the end-all, be-all, but we want to keep it simple. It's the creation of a distribution channel to build brand identity and attain market dominance quickly. And one of the ways, and that quickly, notice it's in bold, and one of the reasons it can be done quickly is because franchising, from the franchisor standpoint, is using OPM. And in case there's anybody on the call that doesn't know what that means, it's other people's money. So you as a franchisee have the capital that you invest, and you may get some loans, and Steve Buch is going to talk about that. So it can be very, very quickly. And when a franchisor may decide to go into a new market, they can get brand identity and awareness very, very quickly because they don't have to use corporate capital. And the basic structure on the right is and it's oversimplified, there's a franchise headquarters. Obviously, some have regional offices as well. There are franchise operators. And then there are customers. And what I like to do on charts like that, and we're not going to show it on the slide, is turn it upside down, because the customer really comes first. So the franchise headquarters and the franchise operators live to get, grow, and keep customers. A franchise is a license to use name and trademarks. These have great value. When there's awareness in the marketplace of a brand, and I'll use one in this area, Ritas, which started in this area about 25 years ago in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, and now has, I don't know, somewhere between 500 and 700 stores. But in the Philadelphia area for sure, and others where they have a strong presence. You mentioned Ritas. Almost everybody knows what it is. It's Italian ice, and it's certain drinks, and frozen desserts and treats. Products and services. I just mentioned some that Rita's had. So you mention the word KFC to somebody, and they know it's, you know, chicken and mashed potatoes and biscuits. And if you've been looking at some of the commercials, even George Hamilton as the extra crispy kernel. Business systems, very, very important part of the franchise equation is systems that are in place that you adopt and use, and it speeds up the process of being up and running and being successful. Now, you get all this in exchange for an initial franchise fee, and I don't know of any franchisors that don't have an initial franchisee, an initial franchise fee, I'm sorry. And then there are ongoing royalties, and you pay those royalties for as long as you're in the business until your contract runs out, if you choose not to renew or sell the business. I did talk earlier about the disclosure document. I said DD, it's FDD, and it explains the obligations for the franchisor and the franchisees. It explains how territorial limits are derived. It lists contact information for current franchisees by state, and it talks about franchisees who have left, or former franchisees who have left the system. And before I go to the next one, I want to just emphasize how incredibly important that current franchisee contact information and people who've left the system, how important it is to doing your due diligence. If you do due diligence and you contact, let's say, 10 or 12 current franchisees, and generally they're unhappy with how they're being treated, and they tell you some stories, because my experience has been that, well, look, I know I'm in this boat and I can't get out, but if somebody calls me, I'm going to give them the straight story so they don't jump into it. So that's valuable information. Item 19 in the disclosure document is earnings claims. And the information that the franchisors provide varies from very little or none to an awful lot. But it's very, very important information, and again, part of the due diligence. And the franchisor must also provide its most recent, usually they go back 2 or 3 years, I think Steve Book would know better, the financial statements for the mothership or the franchisor. And it's good to see if, you know, how they're doing and how they're trending. It talks about manager policies, and it very clearly specifies the length of the agreement, the conditions for renewal, conditions under which the agreement may be terminated, and transfer policies. And the word transfer really is sale. It's you get permission from the franchisor, you have a qualified buyer, and the franchise or license and the business is transferred to them, and you get paid what you get paid for selling the business. Due diligence, I've mentioned that already. I implore you, if you're considering a franchise, to contact people that are, not everybody, some might list 300, but if there were 300, I'd sure be making 25 or 30 calls at least. And you can't do this with an independent business owner. And by the way, we're not necessarily advocating that everybody abandon plans they have to do a startup business. What we're doing is attempting to educate on why a franchise may be part of your sphere of consideration. And at this time, I will turn the microphone over to my colleague, Steve Book.
Well, thank you, Mike, and welcome to all our attendees. Let's tackle some common misperceptions about franchising. We'll call these franchising myths. The first being that franchising is only fast food and retail. Well, why? Because this is what we see most commonly. These are the businesses that we most frequent. The fact is, there's over 3,100 different franchise companies in more than 80 industry segments with over 900,000 operating units. Some popular categories are listed here: education, retail, pet care. I'll give you some examples of those. In education, a good example may be a tutoring business. In pet care, maybe a mobile pet grooming business. Cleaning, both commercial and residential, very needs-based, very recession-resistant. In real estate, property management would be a good example. Senior care would be home care, helping seniors into assisted living and matching them carefully so that their needs are taken care of. Home repair, the Mr. Handyman type business. And IT services. Most small and mid-sized companies really can't afford their own IT departments, so they outsource that to third parties. In fact, most people who buy a franchise gravitate to low investment, low overhead service businesses. Franchising myth number 2. Franchises succeed because of the quality of the product. Look, if you have guests over, for lunch on your deck or patio, would you grill your own burgers, or would you serve a McDonald's burger? Right? I'm pretty certain that your burgers would be better than that McDonald's burger. So it's really not the product. So what is it? Why is it that McDonald's has sold billions of hamburgers? Fact is, it's all about the business systems. Their marketing, sales, operation, accounting. So whether you buy a McDonald's here in the Philadelphia area, Los Angeles, or Hong Kong, you're going to get the same fast service and consistent product at every location. Next, successful franchises emerge in a new industry with no new competitors. Well, finding an opportunity like this is pretty rare. A good example of a business like that we're hearing a lot about today would be a business like Uber. But the fact is that successful franchises emerge from well-established industries by creating industry consolidation. So we often get asked, why should I pay royalties to a franchise company when I can start a business like that on my very own, right? And you could cite many reasons that franchises are really a good option. But one of the key takeaways I think that you should have from this webinar is that franchises take disproportionate market share. Again, it's the system, right? Ray Kroc started McDonald's when there was a burger joint on every corner. So in small business and franchising, we look to enter well-established, fragmented markets, right, where we can apply the successful, proven franchise system to take market share. Franchising myth number 4. Franchises are expensive. Well, this is always relative to how much net worth we have and how much liquid capital that we have. So as mentioned earlier, most people gravitate to low investment franchises. So on this chart, you can see that 30% of the franchises, and this goes back to that list of 3,100 different franchises, are under $100,000 total investment, and 58% are under $250,000. But look, the reality is that most of us don't have the money or the financial risk tolerance for a McDonald's, right, which could cost, investment-wise, up to $1.1, $1.2 million to open. So how much do I need? Well, before the banks collapsed the economy, you were able to put about 10% of your own money in and finance the rest of what you needed for a franchise business. Today, that number is typically 25%. In some cases, we're seeing 20%, but I think 25 is the number that, in today's economy and with where the banks and lenders are today, figure if you have a $100,000 investment, you're going to have to put about $25,000 towards it and then fund the rest. So how do we finance these franchises? Right, these aren't in any order, But today, most common, and what we're seeing, really more than anything else, are SBA loans. The 401k rollover, which we're not going to talk about in detail today, we'll probably be talking about that in more detail at the seminar, is certainly popular, as are home equity line of credits, as the equity and the price of our homes has risen since the recession. So let's get back to the popularity of these low investment, low overhead service businesses. Right? So the next myth here, high return requires high investment. Right? I need to spend $1 million to save to earn $1 million. Well, the fact is there's really no correlation between the cost of the franchise and the potential return. So most people, and why not, right? Most people are looking for a business where they can invest low and return high. And franchises, especially these service franchises, provide that opportunity. They're less capital capital intensive, and the service businesses frequently yield much higher returns. If you're in a location-based business, a brick and mortar type business, if you do end up in a location that is not the best, you could have a ceiling on the revenue of that particular business, even if you market it hard and effectively. Franchising myth number 6, industry experience is required. So we work with a lot of people that are considering all options, including corporate jobs. And when you're looking at a corporate job, if you're in career transition, it's almost imperative that you have experience in that business or that market segment. Not so with franchising. The fact is, only 25% of franchisees are in the same industry as when they were employed. Franchising tends to work best with non-complex business models. So the franchisor holds the technical expertise and easily transfers the technical piece of the business to the new franchisee via training programs. So if you're tired of your business, you're tired of your career, tired of your industry, franchising allows a fresh start and actually welcomes a fresh start. Okay, with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Mike. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's yours, Mike.
Okay, thank you. This number always stuns me. The franchise industry is over $1 trillion. I did allude earlier in my presentation the difference between successful startups that are independent and franchise startups. Less than 12% of businesses are franchised nationally, and they account for 50% of all retail sales. That's staggering. And here's the great news. Over 90% of franchises are still in business after 5 years. 5 years is almost like if you're cancer-free for 5 years, doesn't mean you still can't get it, but that's a major milestone. 90%. And the corresponding number for startups, I believe, that are still in business and successful after 5 years. I'm not sure if it's on another slide, but that's about an 80% failure rate, which means about 20% are still in business. So that's the trade-off. The trade-off is you're exchanging some of your operating costs in the long term for risk reduction in the short term, and I might add, in the long term as well, based on that last slide where franchises are successful for the long haul versus independent startups. So as Steve has alluded to, Steve Book, franchises are not all the same. Some have many units, some have fewer units. Some are older and well established, like I mentioned, Rita's, KFC goes back to the late 50s. Uber, pretty new. And there are structured versus flexible systems. When I say flexible, I don't mean totally flexible. I guess it might have been better if I'd have written high degree of structure versus lower degrees of structure, but they all have structure. And expensive versus inexpensive. A close friend of mine who I do some consulting for has a very, very large Taco Bell franchise. He and his partner have over 100 units, and they just opened up a unit. I can't say where, but it cost $1.4 million to open up a Taco Bell. So that's land, building, and equipment. And of course, the numbers that it opened at are staggering. But that's not to say that we can all afford a Taco Bell. So, also, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. Franchises are a hybrid between being a corporate executive, if you will, and an independent business operator. And I want to go back to something I said previously. Not by yourself. You have the franchisor who has expertise and resources that are available to you, and you have fellow franchisees, and over time you form relationships with some of your fellow franchisees, and the ability to sit down over coffee and compare challenges and talk about results and how to optimize profitability is very, very valuable. And if you're an independent business person, let's say you own the local flower shop, chances are there's not another flower shop in town, and if there's one close by, they're probably not going to want to talk to you anyway. So, a word of caution. If you classify yourself or see yourself as an entrepreneur, franchising really may not be right for you. Most, if not all, entrepreneurs, they want to do their own thing. If you look up the definition of entrepreneur, it kind of says that. And as a franchisee, you really can't be entrepreneurial. You may bring ideas to the table and discuss them with the franchisor. You may get permission to test a procedure or to test a new product, but you're bound by a contract and you must follow the systems in place, and you have to display the marks and trade dress. Trade dress is, the color of the building, the furniture. If you're a Taco Bell franchisee, for example, they'll give you a catalog if you're going to build a new store, and you may have different configurations to select from and different types of furniture, but you can't go outside the bounds of what is in the manual. So at this point, we're going to turn the program back to our leader, Dave Boster, who will conduct questions and answers and a wrap-up. Again, I want to thank everybody for attending, and we hope to be able to have a live seminar in the not-too-distant future.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I would like Steve Book just to give a quick word on FranNet, which is a franchise consulting firm, because some of you, it may be an avenue for some of you to pursue. So, Steve, if you just want to give a thumbnail sketch of what FranNet does.
Yeah, sure. I sure will, Dave. So FranNet is a very well-respected 25-year-old international franchise consulting firm. We have over 70 offices in North America. We always work local. We always work face-to-face with our clients. We always offer our services free of charge, so there are no written contracts, and there is never money that's exchanged hands between us. Our organization has worked very closely with the SBA since 1987. In fact, the franchise information on the SBA website is all FranNet provided. But what we really do is we offer a service. One of the biggest mistakes the public makes is gravitating to franchise businesses that they know or have a product that they like. that's not the time to look at franchises. The best way for you to mitigate risk in going into any business, of course, is with thorough due diligence. But strong franchise consulting companies and strong franchise consultants will thoroughly assess an individual client. And then, this is a really big takeaway from this, then they'll build a business model for that client. Right? Once the business model is built, and we know everything about the client and everything the client wants in the business, then and only then do we start to match the franchise to the business model. So that's the best way to mitigate risk, and if we do that well, then it should give the client and candidate the best chance of business success.
Okay. Thank you. And so there are one or two questions on the board which we'll get to, but I just want to make sure everybody understands the role of SCORE Bucks County. We're the local chapter of a national organization. We're all volunteers. We're, for the majority, retired and semi-retired business people with varied backgrounds. We have a two-pronged sort of goal. One is to facilitate education of small business owners and entrepreneurs, and the second prong is face-to-face free mentoring sessions. So if you have questions about your business, starting a business, where do I find funding, how do I market, how do we sell, what's social marketing, you can contact SCORE Bucks County, and we'll be happy, one or two people will be happy to sit down and talk with you about that. And you can find us at the website there. There will be a recording available which will be automatically sent to you in the next day or so of this webinar. Please note November 30th is a Wednesday, a webinar which will cover a very important topic and one often overlooked on workman's comp, and then in mid-December, recruiting and interviewing. And we do have one or two questions on the floor. The first one is from, I assume it's a Mr. Goltz, maybe? I'm not sure of his last name. I hope I didn't mispronounce it. But his question is, does it take more cash to buy a franchise versus buying an existing business? More loans? Isn't an existing business more likely to get a loan? So I don't know which one of our three people want to jump on that, but go ahead.
So this is Steve. So the second part of that is about the loans. Will you just repeat, Dave, just the second piece of that question?
Isn't an existing business more likely to get a loan than
yes, if it's cash. Yes, if it's cash flow positive, and most when you're looking at existing businesses, resale businesses, you not only have the financials of the business, but you have tax returns of the owners. So the funding institutions have a very, very strong understanding of the cash flow of that business, and yes, they are more apt to loan money for it based on a valuation of that business that they would do independent, and you as potential buyer may have already done with an accounting firm. And if you would go back to the first section of that question.
Well, I will, oh, Don, you've self-muted yourself. I can't unmute you. I was going to say you could ask it yourself, but
yeah, I think the question. I think the question was: is it more expensive to buy a resale?
Yes.
Or a franchise, start a franchise versus buying a resale business? Well, so that's all relative to the valuation of the resale business, right? If it has very little cash flow, if it's a distressed business, you can pick a resale up for almost nothing. Maybe less expensive than starting up a start-from-scratch franchise. But in a general sense, if we say that the attractive resale business is being purchased because it does have positive cash flow of a material nature, then typically the startup franchise is much less expensive to start than is the resale business. But again, this is in a general sense.
Okay. And Tariq Hindi asks, I don't have fast food management experience. Can I still be approved for one? And Steve, if you want to answer that.
Maybe
Well,
I
yeah,
should
we got a couple guys that really have great experience here with that, but
Oh.
I guess I'll start with it and say, look, with a franchise, the answer is absolutely yes. To get a loan for a private startup business, if you want to start a restaurant, it's almost impossible if you don't have proven successful restaurant management experience, because restaurants have the highest failure rate of any business. So they're very, very hard to get funded unless you have a proven track record.
I want to add to that. This is Mike. Tariq, thank you for attending. Tariq and I spoke a few days ago, and we're going to have a face-to-face discussion next week. There are some systems, irrespective of financial wherewithal, that are closed or semi-closed. For example, most of the new McDonald's franchises that you see open are not new franchisees. They're expansion of existing franchisees. Not all, but most. Most franchise systems that are highly evolved and extremely structured, if you don't have prior experience, you will have to have on your team, either as a manager or maybe even a minority partner, someone that has that operational experience, because they don't want a building to go up and their signage to go up and then see it go dark after 8 months or a year or something like that. So I hope that between Steve and I, we've helped you, and I look forward to meeting with you, Tariq, next week.
Okay. And then we have a series of questions from Mirage Pat. Again, I think he is self-muted, and I'll read his question. How does franchising work with Social Security employment network that makes people wonder when IWP pass plan and pass budget is offered? Do we understand? I'm not sure what that means.
I don't understand that question.
Yeah, nor do I.
Can't help on that one.
All right, Mirage, you also had a number of very specific questions about a very specific product, which I think are very important questions, and I would suggest that your best avenue is to contact either Scorebucks County or directly to Steve Book at FranNet to schedule some time to talk about your ideas, because you have some a very interesting idea about a very specific potential product for a franchise, and it may be beyond the scope of this webinar. So if that's okay with you, we can leave it at that. And I think that has covered all the questions on the floor. If there's none other, I will again thank everybody for their participation and attendance, thank our presenters, and bid you a good night. And we are out. And again, you'll get an email, I don't think it'll be tomorrow, maybe the next day, with a recording of the webinar if you want to review it. All right? Thanks. We'll see you later. We're out.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Yep. Okay, thanks, guys. We're going to sign off now.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well done, everybody.
Yep.
Yes.
Closes and end webinar for all.